welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're going to do something that's probably needed to be done for a while. I'm going to do a class on common issues. And the reason that I'm doing this class is because I get the benefit running this channel and having a focus on OpenTx. You know, I do a lot of OpenTx material. And because of that, I get a lot of questions. I mean, if you scroll through all the different videos, it's kind of hard to put them all together because there's so many questions and comments dispersed through so many different videos, but I get a ton of questions. And the questions I get, over time, I don't want to say I roll my eyes, but you know, when I get the same thing over and over, I'm like, yep, there it is again, there it is again, there it is again. So over time, I've kind of accumulated this idea of the more commonly asked questions that people have, especially when they're new to OpenTx, or until they get to that one point where they spread their wings and fly and they're on their own, and then it's just advanced stuff after that. So this list that I put together is the most common set of questions that I get. Vance, he's right. I do expect them. I get them over and over. In fact, I probably need to put a little file together with a comment like an FAQ so I can just copy and paste the answer in. So anyway, that's what this list is. This is a list of common issues and some of the more common things that I get asked on OpenTx. So I'm hoping that people that are new to OpenTx find this, or people that are struggling and trying to figure out basic problems with OpenTx find this video and they're able to benefit from it. So we'll start out. I'll just go through the list real quick. The most common thing that I get is timers. And I think the reason for timers is because OpenTx has a very robust set of timer capabilities. So a lot of people, when they first get involved, everyone wants a timer, right? That's how if you're flying electric anyway, that's how you manage your flight time. You got to have a timer. So timers, the capabilities out there are super strong, but because there's a lot of little knobs and dials that can be changed, it creates a little bit of confusion about how they work. So that's why timers seem to be a very common question. Paulo, how you doing? Hamilton Hanger, hello. And Pete, how you doing, buddy? So timers, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then under mode, this is another one that gets people all the time, especially if they do a reset. If they do a reset or copy their contents of their card over. I've even fallen for this. I've done this myself. And I'm not like I'm not trying to claim that I'm immune to error. I'm not, but there have been a couple of times when I've done stuff with the radio and I'll get on the radio and nothing works. And I'm like, what the hell is going on with this thing? And then I realize I have that V8 moment, like, dummy, you got to change this. And it's one of those things that'll just get you. So I'm going to talk about modes, physical and software based. And then channel outputs. That's another huge one that I get all the time. So I want to show a couple of tricks for helping decipher what's going on your channels. And then another one that I get from time to time, I wouldn't say this is like the most popular, but it's the one that will pop up because people don't know how to solve it. And that one is the stuck key message. If you get a key stuck message, I'm going to show you how to look into that and figure out what's happening there. And then finally, the last two are the hard ones, and that will be the mixer. We're going to talk about switch and channel assignments because, again, as many videos as I've done on inputs and mixes, I still get an unbelievable amount of questions on the mixer. In fact, I just did a video the other day and somebody watched it and he said, wait a minute, how come your input line is 3 for flaps and on the mixer it's 6? What's up with that? And how come your throttle isn't where it's supposed to be? So I get those kinds of questions still all the time. And then the last thing I want to cover are flaps and spoilers. And the reason I want to cover those is because out of all of the mix questions I get, if I do flaps, someone will say spoilers. If I do spoilers, someone says flaps. If I do flaps, they say mix and elevator. It's just one of those, it's the great mystery for some reason. Mixing flaps and spoilers or spoilerons on OpenTx always seems to be the big mystery. So we're going to cover each one of these, and I'm going to show you how to use curves. The reason I want to go through curves is because curves can help you solve all kinds of problems when it comes to flaps, spoilers, and gear, by the way, landing gear. So we're gonna cover that as well. All right, so with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and pop up the big camera, and you'll notice today, guys, I do not have the chat window up. I am watching the chat window. I will put the chat window next to my screen that I watch so I can see what's going on. But the reason I did that is because I want to focus on the content a little bit more than the chat today. And I really want the radio in view, and I want the plane in view so we can see the demonstration plane. So Arrow2992 says, best trick I found with OpenTx was hitting the TX with a 5-pound sledge. Felt much better. Yeah, I guess for some people that can be therapeutic. But OpenTx is a real kitty cat once you get used to it. All right, let's jump into, first we're going to jump into timers. All right, the big one I want to show you guys is I've got timers on my screen, and you can see, so I've got 513 and 0146. So first thing we'll do is I'm just going to, okay, before I go any further, that's my throttle lock. Okay, my throttle is locked right now, and if I were to activate my throttle on the bench, my throttle would not work. But here's the problem. The timer is. You guys see how the timers, both timers are going? Now, let me describe the timers real fast. The first timer is a flight timer, just a basic countdown timer that you'd use on any plane. So it starts at some number and it works its way down. This timer on the bottom is a persistent or overall timer. This is my airframe timer. I use this quite often, actually, and it tells me how much time I have on a given airframe. So in this case, this one's counting down and this one is counting up. So I'm going to show you how to do that in the first place, and then I'm going to show you how to resolve this issue of why are my timers working when I'm on the bench. I don't even have the model plugged in right now, right? I don't have the motor on, I'm not flying. I don't want my timer going, and I sure don't want my airframe timer going, because that's not an accurate representation of the actual flight time I have on this airframe. So we need to solve that. There's an easy fix for it, and I'm going to show you how to solve that. So let's see. Vance says, "Lol, made me lol for real." Yeah, with the sledgehammer, I guess. Will you show crow with flaps on one channel, ailerons on two? Bart, I've done a video on that already. In fact, if you go look for crow on my channel list, you'll see it. I did one called crow braking, and it's in there. And I've already done one where you can add the flaps and ailerons together and put it into sport mode so they work together, or you can turn that off and use just flaps and spoilers independently. So I've already done that video. That's beyond the scope of today's video. So FL Engineer says, glad I dropped in. I have this problem. Okay. All right. So here we go. My throttle is up. My throttle lock is on. The throttle should have no effect on what's going on, but yet my timers are going. So let's solve that. And first thing I want to show you is I'm going to go into my channel settings, and I'm going to have to make a change because I just realized that I don't have a throttle set up right now. So I need to add a throttle. Now, you'll notice on this setup right now, on the mix screen, I've got channel 1 aileron, channel 2 elevator, channel 3 flaps. We're going to talk about that in a little bit because that throws people through a curve. They say, wait, shouldn't that be throttle? Well, we're going to talk about that. I've got channel 4 rudder, channel 5 aileron, channel 6 flap. I'm going to add channel 7, and I'm going to call that throttle. We're going to call that throttle. So my channel 7 is my throttle, okay? Now, the first thing is it doesn't matter what line it's on. The only thing that you have to understand about this is if you use channel 7 here, you have to connect it to pin number 7 on your receiver. So if you have a throttle, you have to put it on pin number 7 on your receiver. That's all this means. It doesn't matter if you put your throttle on 7 or 3 or 2 or 1. It doesn't matter. OpenTx doesn't care. You just have to make sure that when you connect your physical signal ESC wire to your receiver, that you put it on channel 7. And when you do that, you can put your throttle on channel 7. If you want to put it on channel 3, you can. It doesn't matter though. And that's the first point. Okay, so in my case, my throttle is on channel 7, and I'm going to bring up my monitor and show you that my throttle is on channel 7. See, if I move my throttle stick, you can see channel 7 right here in the monitor going up and down. Now I said my throttle lock is on. Let's fix that. That's a setup mistake on my part. So I'm just going to add a special function right now that's going to be when SH is down, we're going to override channel 7, and I'm going to set it to -100. Okay, so now if I look at my model monitor, now you can see channel 7. When I operate that throttle, I'm not getting any output because I have a throttle lock on. But if I go back to the main screen, we still see that my timer is still counting up even though my throttle is parked, right? Or, well, when it's moved off 0, even though it's locked, it's still counting up. That's what we got to correct. So we're going to do that by going into model, and notice that I've got for source or timer 1, THS, okay? That's the throttle stick. That means when that thing is active, this timer is going to start. That explains why this timer starts moving when I move this stick, because it says, hey, when the throttle stick moves, start working. That's what you're telling the radio. Okay, when the throttle stick is down at 0, notice it's not moving. When I put it up, it's moving, even though my throttle lock is on. So to fix that, what we need to do is go down a little bit lower. And it would have been nice if they would have included this up top, but they didn't. But notice this thing right here called source. If you change that, instead of being your throttle stick, and change that, remember the channel that I had? I picked channel, what, 7, right? So if we change that to channel 7, now what happens is that this timer only moves when channel 7 moves, or when channel 7's active. But remember, channel 7 can't be active because we have it locked. Okay, so now if I go back to this main screen, you see that I've got my stick moved all the way up and it's not moving. Timer's not going anywhere, even though the stick's up. Now watch what happens when I unlock the throttle. I'm just going to move this lock down and watch. There goes the timer. Both timers, by the way. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys that there is a way to control this so that your timer only works when your throttle is unlocked. And you don't have to, you know, it's kind of a thing, because if you turn your radio on and you bump your throttle, you don't want your timer starting and yelling at you and arguing with you and your total timer going on. That's all inconvenient. We don't like that. All right, let me check the comments here. Michael D says, I watched video 4 in your series, able to get bootloader and radio update. I have SD card error, tried to add new SD card and said much data. I know. I have an SD card error on 2311. Tried to add newer SD card and said too much data. All right, Michael, you know what? We'll have to take that up at the end. That's going to derail me from the topic for today, but we'll take that up at the end. When we get to the end, bring that question up again. We'll take a look at it. Okay, so there we go. That's how you set it so that your radio only increments your timer when you're actually meaning to run your throttle. David says, can you set your countdown timer to start and stop at a percentage of throttle, like 20% and above it? You can, David, if you do that with a logical switch. You can do that with a logical switch. I'll save that for another day, but you absolutely could do that with a logical switch. You simply, for your source, David, if you really want to do that, what you would do is come down here and set a logical switch instead of throttle stick right here. You'd set that for a logical switch. And then all you need to do is make your logical switch a absolute value and call it 80, whatever. And then when you move past 20% in either direction, the timer will start. Okay. All right. So there you go, guys. That's how we do the timer thing. Now, I wanted to show you the next thing about this was the count down and count up. All right. So I've set in timer 1, I've set a value of 7. So when I reset my timer, and I activate it, you'll notice that this one counts down, but this one still counts up. Now, the reason it does that is because in timer 1, I've set a number. So all I did was set a number. If I don't set a number here, what's going to happen, and I'll just set it down to 0 and show you. So if I turn that down to 0 and then back out, and I'll just reset my timer, notice it's back to 0 now. And if I turn my reset off, notice how this is now counting up. That's the nature of timers. If you have a number in the timer, it will count down from that number. If you have no number in the timer, it counts up. That's just what it does. So if you want to have a count up timer, like a total timer, that's what I did with timer 2. Notice timer 2 still uses THS, and I have 0, 0, 0 all the way across. That's a count up timer. The only other thing to do is set persistence to be a manual reset. That means this timer will hold its value over time. The only way it will reset is if I manually reset that timer. So I'll show you how to do that too, but that's the nature of a persistent timer. And I even name mine total time. All right, so that's the way these two timers are set up to work. I'm gonna go ahead and put a number back in this one just so we have a difference, you know, just for the example here. Okay, 7 minutes and 0. So when I go back to the main screen now, I'll reset my timers, and now we have everything working the way we expect it to work. All right, now that's the basic timer setup. FL Engineer says, I swear I've done that and it still doesn't work. Must be user error somewhere. Yeah, FL Engineer, this is just make sure that you have 2 things you have to make sure of to kind of circle the wagons here. Number 1, you need to make sure that your source down here at the bottom marries up to the channel that your throttle is on. And then the second thing is you have to make sure that your throttle lock is effective. And that's one thing I didn't have set up because I didn't have a throttle on mine. You have to make sure your throttle lock is effective, and you can check your throttle lock right here on channel 7. You notice when I click my throttle lock, do you see that little lock icon? That means I have an active throttle lock. So that's throttle lock on, throttle lock off. All right. So once you've done those two things, it will work. That's the way it works. So my throttle lock is on. You can see my throttle is up. The only thing I'll do to get that timer going, I'm just going to turn my throttle. I won't touch anything else. All right, hands off. And there we go. My timer is going. So that is the way that works. Okay, now let's reset. Let's talk about resets. There's a couple of different ways you can do resets, and one of the things I like to do on mine is I do timer resets on a global function. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. You can do it either in global functions or special functions or with the jog dial. I'll show you all three. In global functions, all I did was put in a value on GF7 right here that says when SE is down, reset timer 1. And then put a little check mark in the end. So that means whenever I'm done flying for the day or done flying for a battery, or if I change my battery or whatever, all I have to do is hit this SE switch down, and you notice how my timer goes back to 7 minutes. When I put SE back up, it starts counting down again. So that's one way you can do a timer reset. Now notice it only does timer 1 because in the global function, I only have it set up to do timer 1. If you wanted to do timer 2 or timer 3, you could. But here's the option where I select timer 1, okay? Now I'm gonna delete this one and show you that we can also add this. I'm gonna go back here and hit SE, you'll see that it no longer does anything, right? When I move that switch, it's no longer resetting my timer because I just deleted it. You can also add that to special functions. So if we go over to special functions and click on SF2, I'm hitting the jog dial. I'll just hit SE down, so it highlights that switch for me. I'll press enter on the jog dial, and we'll just find, we don't want set timer, we want reset timer. Did I skip it? There it is, reset timer 1, put a check mark in there. Now this is only model specific. This will not impact other models. It will only impact this model. So there's my timer counting down. I'll hit the reset button, SE, and you can see my timer 1 is reset. Okay, so that's how you set your timer reset in both your global functions and your special functions. Remember, global functions is all models. Special functions is just this model. Okay, that's the difference. So decide where you want it. I like to use mine on all models. So in my radio, SE, when I move SE down, that resets timer 1 no matter what I fly. It doesn't matter. Ken Morrow, how you doing, buddy? Thanks for checking in. Okay. That's it on the timer thing. I think we beat that one up. Oh, no, there was one other thing I wanted to show you, and that's how to reset it from the main screen. So notice I've got my timer going, and I've got my persistent timer counting up, okay? If you want to reset them from the main screen, you can do that too. You simply long press the jog dial, and you'll see an option here that says reset, and you see the 3 ellipses there. If you scroll down to where it says reset, you can either reset your flight, which basically reloads the model. It's like reselecting this model, or you can reset timer 1, timer 2, or timer 3. Let's pick timer 1. And when I do that, you'll see I'm back to 7 minutes and it starts counting down again. And here's my persistence timer at 10 minutes 30. If I want to reset that, I can long press the jog dial, click on reset, and reset timer 2. And there's my total timer back down to 0. Okay? Guys, that is the top to bottom on timers. So that is everything that I can show on how to, basic timer operation without getting into logic. So that is it for the basic timer setup. All right. Next one is mode. We'll go back to the blackboard and I want to show you guys this one, the mode switch. So, okay, you get into mode 1 and mode 2, and there's a difference between physical and logical or software driven, okay? In the physical side, a mode 2 radio has the throttle on the left. So when I move this stick up and down, this is my throttle, it stays wherever, because there's no spring. The spring is removed, and the tension device is set so that it doesn't pull it back to center. Okay, so this is throttle, right? When I move that up and down, that's my throttle. On my right-hand side, I have elevator, right? So you notice my little elevator's moving over here, but it's spring-loaded. When I let go, that the elevator goes back to center. That's a mode 2 radio. That's the physical arrangement of a mode 2 radio. But there's also a software arrangement on mode 2. And this is the one that bites people all the time. It's gotten me. I've been bit by this one. Now, the way you set that is by going into System. You press the System button and you scroll over to the Gear tab and go left with the jog dial. And right here at the bottom, it's hidden all the way at the bottom. There's a little option there called Mode. And you have mode 2, and you can see you've got rudder, throttle, elevator, and aileron. What that's telling you is that your left stick has rudder and throttle, and then your right stick has aileron and elevator. If you change this to mode 1, everything changes. And I'm telling you, I've done this, man. I've done a reset, and I couldn't figure out for the life of me why my stupid elevator wasn't working, because now I have elevator over here and throttle over here. So it's a mode 1 radio in that case. So in this model now, I've got rudder and elevator. You can see the elevator moving with my throttle stick, right? And it doesn't matter what I do in my setup. That doesn't matter. It'll throw you because you've got these different channels set up. You've got the reason is because it's inputs. You're telling the radio we've rearranged the physical inputs, and that's why. So the elevator, now the radio says that belongs to this stick. All right, that's the elevator. So that will mess you up. And I've seen it over and over, man. I get asked this question all the time. People pull their hair out. They're like, I can't figure out why nothing works right. Go check your mode. Make sure your mode is set the way you anticipate it to be set. I'll set mine back to mode 2. And there we go. Now my rudder and throttle are back where they belong for my use case. And my elevator and aileron are back on this side. Okay. So that's modes. That's a big one. I get that all the time. And I just wanted to walk through the difference between a physical mode and a software mode, because you have to do both, right? Your physical should marry up with your software configuration on OpenTx. Okay, there's a quiz coming, and we're going to talk about output calibration. So go back to the points that I made on the initial opening of the class. We're going to talk a little bit about channel output and calibration. All right, so on channel output and calibration, I want to go into my modes, my channel monitor, and I want to show you guys, I want to ask a question. I'm going to zoom the camera in because I really want you guys to see this up close. I want you to see exactly what's going on here because there's a quiz. There's a quiz. This is the quiz. Now, first thing I'm going to do is back out, and I'm going to reset all my trims. I want to make sure all my trims are centered. 0. Whoop, that one's not exactly centered. I don't want any cheating going on here. That one's centered, that one's centered, that one's centered. So you guys agree, all my trims are centered. All right, now we'll go and look at outputs, and we want to make sure there's no offset in the outputs, and there's not. Every one of these offsets is 0. So if I look at my channel monitor though, why is my aileron not centered? So that's question number 1. Okay, for the quiz, why is my aileron not centered? What's up with that? Why are these off center? I just showed you that my trims are all 0. Right? My trims are all 0. And if we go through my setup screens, I don't see anything here. I see a curve. There's a curve. That's for the curve demo. But I don't see anything in here. I don't see anything in the mixer. So why is it that that's not centered? And then I'm going to add one more question to this just to kind of really mess with you guys a little bit. Let me zoom out just a little. I want to show you one other thing that's going on with this radio that's kind of screwy. And that's, I want you to watch my finger and watch the travel of the aileron. So I'm going to move this aileron over and notice what happens with the output. You see how it hits 100%? But look at my finger. Look how much more I can go with my finger. What's up with that? Why am I at 100% here, but look how much more I have to go here. All right. What's up with that? That's not cool. That's not correct. That's not correct. Bart, you're a smart guy. That's one answer, recalibration. And Bart's right about that. So when you move the stick over, the reason I'm hitting 100% and I haven't gotten all the way to the end is because the calibration's wrong. That's wrong. But the reason for center, that's not wrong. So what's the deal with that trim being off like that? That's the quiz question, guys. So I'm going to ask you guys now, since Bart already got, oh, Chief BD. Chief BD is a smart guy. Where is it? Where is it? So since Bart got the recalibration thing right, we're going to do that first. So remember what I said, I'm moving the stick all the way over. I'm at 100%, but I still have, look at all this room I have. That's not cool. We need to fix that. We're going to do that by doing a calibration. So Chief BD, I want you to think about your answer a little bit more and give me more information because you're on the right track. So we'll do a calibration by hitting System. And the reason you guys might say, well, John, I've done calibrations before. I want to make sure we do the correct way, right? I want to make sure that everyone knows the correct way. If this bores you, go get a Coke for a minute. So calibration, let me back out. We'll hit System, hit the System button, go page left until you see calibration. All right. Then we're going to hit the jog dial on there. And the radio says, okay, if you want to do a calibration, press enter to start. So I'm going to press enter. Now, the first thing it says is center sticks, pots, sliders, and then press enter. So let's center everything. Our sliders over here on the left, we need to find center for those. And I like to move them a little bit until I find that detent, and I know I'm in that detent exactly where I'm supposed to be. Right there. There's the detent. There's the detent on this side. On the pots up top, that's a little bit easier to do. So there's my center on that one. All right, everything's centered. My throttle's centered. Okay, everything is centered, right? Now we're going to go ahead and hit enter because I've got everything centered. And now it says move the stick, sliders, and pots, and then press enter. So now the trick here is you have to be very gentle, but you have to go full stop to full stop. And that was the problem with the last calibration. When I did that calibration, I stopped short of full. So I'm going to go all the way over to the side, but I'm not going to crank it. I'm not trying to bend it into spot. You just want to go until it touches and then stop. So there's the left, there's right, there's up, there's down. And then on this stick, we'll do the same thing. We'll do right, left, up, down. And notice I'm just going to the stop. We're not shoving it. Don't monkey fist it. Just touch the stop. Same thing on the sliders. Go left, up and down. Do right, up and down. It doesn't matter if you recenter it afterwards. And then same thing with your pots. The reason the screen went dark is because I have a screen brightness on my right slider. So don't worry about that. That's just a global function doing that. That's all that is. So we've got our pots, we've got our sliders, and don't forget to do your 6 position switch. Just go through all the positions on the switch and make sure that they are all pressed. And you should be able to see on the bottom the indicator showing you that you're in the different switch modes. Okay? So once you've done that, just press enter, and that's it. That's the calibration. So now we'll go back to our monitor screen and press monitor, and now I'll show you when I move my stick all the way over, I don't get to the output end until I'm at the end of my travel on my stick. Okay? That solves problem number 1. Problem number 2, input weight and offset. Chief BD is on the money. You get 3 gold stars today because I hid that. I was trying to make it hard to find. You nailed it. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. The reason that this is off has nothing to do with trim, although it kind of looks like trim. So if you look at the monitor and say, well, wait a minute, you got this off over here to the side, but I have no trim. I have no trim, and I have nothing in my outputs. There's no sub trim involved either. So Chief BD got it. He said, wait a minute, you got an offset somewhere. And it can be either in inputs or it can be in the mixer. It could have been in either one. So he got it right though. He said it's in the mixer. So gold star. Let's go into Aileron setup and notice there's no visual. That's another thing. There's no visual indicator that there's an offset here. It would be nice if they did put some kind of indicator, but there isn't. That's the other thing that makes this challenging. There's no indicator that there's an offset. So I'm going to go into the Aileron and hit edit and look at the little offset I have right there. That little son of a gun right there. That's the troublemaker. So we're going to take that out. Now, offsets are great. I'm not saying don't use them. I'm just saying if things aren't zeroed out, it's not correct. You know, unless you intend it for it to not be zeroed out, right? That's the thing. If you intend for it not to be zero, that's fine if that's what you choose, right? My point is that if that's not what you're expecting, then you should see this, right? It should be perfectly on 0 for all of them. And that's the point. Okay, my throttle is all the way down at negative 100 because it's down, right? It's down to 0 or negative 100. Everything else is centered. Okay, so now we have a correct setup, right? Everything is where it's supposed to be. I wanted to show you guys that because I get that all the time. People are like, my throws aren't working left or right the way they're supposed to. I don't see the correct outputs. What's the deal? Should this look like that? No, it shouldn't. When everything is set up, unless you purposely add a differential or an offset, and not even differential. Differential only changes the throw on each side of the stick. But unless you do something like change a trim, sub trim, or offset, these should be zeroed out right here every time. And start with that. Start with that. So Vance says your gyro shared a channel. That sounds different. I use this set of gyro to on or off before sharing the gear channel. Your gyro share. Okay, you guys are having a little sidebar. That's good. Okay, so there's the calibration and the offset. So I wanted to make sure we did that one because I get that quite a bit. Okay, stuck keys. Every now and then I hear about a stuck key. It's not a big thing. I don't hear it a lot, right? It's not like it's a pervasive problem. But from time to time, people come in and say, hey, I got a stuck key message. What do I do about that? Let me show you what to do about that. We're going to back this camera up just a little bit. Now, stuck keys. I can't give you the stuck key error because I don't have any stuck keys, right? Right now, I have no stuck keys, so I can't show you what that looks like. But when you have a stuck key, I've had this before. When you power on the radio, you get an error message that says key is stuck. So if you can get past that by, pressing the buttons, jogging things around, sometimes that'll free things up and you'll get into the radio. If you can't, yeah, then you're in trouble. Then the only thing you're really going to be able to do is get a hold of Radio Master for some help. You might end up having to take the radio apart and disconnecting switch by switch by switch until you find out which one is stuck. Okay, but if that's not the case and you can manage to get into the radio, let me show you how you look at it. So we'll back out to the main menu screen, hit system, and we're going to go over to hardware. And then from the hardware page, if you go left, there's a little option. All these really cool options for some reason are hidden down at the bottom, but there's an option under debug called keys. So if we click on keys, you can see that we've got a screen now that shows us what's going on with all of our different hardware keys on the radio. So I'm just going to walk through these real quick. Page down, that's this one. So you notice when I press page down, you see how that toggles to a 1? Well, the first thing to notice is if you have a moment, all these are momentary switches. So if any of these are already 1, that's your problem, right? So like if I turn this on, whoops, sorry, I hit return and held it. So if I turn this on and I look at page down, or page up rather, and I see a 1 there, but I'm not holding that button, that's the problem. That button is the one that's the problem. You get it? So there's page down, there's page up, here's enter. So if you turn this screen on and your enter is stuck at 1, that's your problem. That's the one that's causing you the issue. All right, does that make sense? Same thing with your trims. You can do trims up and down. There's trim, where's 1? Here it is. There's trim 1. You see how when I hit 1, I see that illuminate, and this one on the right, that illuminates. So left, I get a 1 there. Right, I get a 1 here. On T4, for example, if I go left, I get a 1 here. If I go right, I get a 1 there. That's how you figure out which key is stuck. The only thing they don't have on here is power. There is no power button test. If I hit the power button, it's going to complain that I'm still connected, but it doesn't show me on the screen the power button. That's the only thing missing is power. So if you have a keyboard stuck issue and you can get past the error screen, this is where you go to look into that. Try and figure out by getting into the switch test button screen, which key is giving you the problems. You can also figure out if one's flaky. Like you might get here and find that it says 0, but if you press the button a few times and then let go and find out it stays on 1, that could be your problem as well. Now, how you solve that, that's a completely different issue. Maybe you can clean it with some cleaner. Maybe you can replace it with another switch. There might be options, but I just wanted to throw that out there is when you want to troubleshoot a key stuck issue, this is the best place in the radio that you can do that. All right, Codemaster says I turned on RSSI and shows okay, that's off topic for this one. Vance, I see now that Orange TX does something similar. Never thought of sharing the channel. Thought it was okay. You guys are sharing channels still. Good. All right. So that's the key stuck issue. Let's go back to the blackboard and I'm going to talk about the mixer, switch and channel assignments. This is another one. Okay. This is like a pet peeve one of mine because people ask this question all the time because I do crazy things with my setups. I'm going to go back to the big camera and I'm going to talk a little bit about the mixer again. So notice in my case, I've got Aileron on channel 1, flaps on channel 2, elevator on channel 2, flaps on channel 3, rudder on 4, aileron on 5, flap on 6, and throttle on 7. That throws a lot of people through a loop. They cannot understand, they can't seem to fathom or connect why I'm doing that. Or the thing about it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. if you want to put your ailerons on channel 2 or your elevator, say you want to put your elevator on channel 8. Let's just say for argument's sake that on my, I got to zoom out so I can show it. Let's just say for argument's sake in this receiver, it's an 8-channel receiver. So I've got 8 sets of pins.
Telemetry lost. Telemetry recovered.
I'm swamping. That's what I'm getting, the telemetry error. So let's say for argument's sake, this is an 8-channel receiver. I've got 8 sets of pins on there. I can take this elevator interface right here and just move it and say, well, I'm going to take my elevator and I want my elevator on pin 8. There we go. My elevator is now on pin 8. Now, the plane's not going to work because I don't have a pin 8. But if I did, all I'd have to do is take my elevator lead, just take my elevator lead and put it on pin 8. That's all I'd have to do and it would work fine. If I want to put my elevator on channel 1, I can. It doesn't matter. The point is when you guys watch these videos and when you make your assignments, you can put your physical device on any pin you want. The only thing you have to remember is look at the number here on the mixer and correlate that. Sorry, I got my wires kind of hung up. There we go. Now I've got them freed up. So all you have to do is correlate the number here in your mixer with the number here on your receiver. Okay? So 1 here means 1 here. 2 here means 2 here. That's it. Other than that, it doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to throw a little caveat in there and point out that this is a stabilizing receiver. So because this is a stabilizing receiver, you kind of have to follow their markings. All right? I do need to point that out because you'll say, well, wait a minute. Does that mean on an S6R I can put my ailerons on the throttle? No, you can't do that. This is a stabilizer. It's different. This one does have some rules. But understand, that's not a rule of OpenTx. OpenTx could care less. This is a receiver saying, hey, I need to see ailerons on channel 1. All right. So I do want to throw that caveat out there. This isn't the best receiver to use to make the case. But if you're not going to use a stabilized receiver and you're just using a regular, any like a FlySky or any, I'm trying X8R or something like that from FreeSky, any non-stabilized receiver that doesn't have very specific pin assignment requirements, then it doesn't matter in here what you do. The only thing you've got to do is make sure you match the pin number on the receiver with the channel number on the mixer. Okay. Now, I don't know how many times I've said that, probably a lot. And for those of you who are regular subscribers and viewers on the channel, you've probably heard me say that a dozen times, but you do not have to assign any particular surface to any particular pin on the mixer in OpenTx because the radio simply doesn't care. All right. You guys can ask questions, Dave. I don't mind questions, but I'd like to keep them kind of on topic. So like Codemaster asked a question about RSSI and a problem he's having in Discord with his particular setup, and that's kind of off the track. So if you got something related to the material, fire away. But, individual problem solving is not what I'm trying to accomplish on this particular video right now. Okay. All right. So there we go. Assigning. All right. Now assigning a switch. This is another one that's one of my favorites, and we're going to do flaps. So I get this, the next question I get quite a bit is, hey, I want to use a switch for flaps. So some people, they like to use a switch. They say for flaps, I want to use a switch. Now for me, so there's my flaps. You can see my flaps moving and I have them assigned to a switch. All right. That works. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. For me, I like to use the slider, but I get this question all the time. How do I assign XX switch to XX interface on the radio? So in this case, if you look in the mixer, let me put my elevator back so that doesn't confuse things for later. So let me just move this back real quick. All right, there we go. So if you look at the mixer, you can say, well, you don't have a switch in here. You just have a source called flaps. So you might ask the question, well, how do I assign a switch for flaps instead of something else? Well, and what you do is you go to the input screen and you'll see that I've got flaps defined right here. Right here is my flap input and I've got a value of 100 and the source is SC. Okay, so we'll edit this and right now I've got SC. Let's say that I don't want SC. Let's say for argument's sake, I want SD to be my flap switch. So all you have to do is highlight that source, press enter so the field blinks and then move the switch that you want. So now that I've done that, my switch for flaps is now SD. Okay. It's now SD, no problem. Now, if you decide, no, I don't want to switch, I'd rather have a slider, you can go back to the source and highlight the source again and just move your slider. Now, when you move the slider, you can see it switches to LS, and now I've got a slider operating my flaps. You'd be surprised how many times I get that question is, how do I assign a switch or how do I assign a slider to an interface? That's how. I use it. Now, the reason we're doing it on inputs is because I have two flaps, right? And they're both being commanded by the same switch. So I do like to set that up on inputs. And then on this side, you'll notice that channel 3 and channel 6 both have a flap assigned. And the reason for that has to do with the physical orientation of your servos on your plane. If you have a plane that allows for the flaps to be on a Y, which means the plane lays the servos out in a physical orientation such that when they're both getting the same signal, they both move down, then you don't need two channels. But if you're on an aircraft like this one, where the physical layout of the servos does not account for the same directional movement, then you do need to put them on two different channels. I could resolve this by flipping one of the horns and putting it on the other side. That's how I could resolve it, and then I could put my flaps on the same channel. Just throwing that out there so you guys know. In this particular case, because these two horns move in, the physical layout requires that both of these cannot be on a Y, because if they're on a Y, they're going to operate like ailerons. They have to be on separate channels in this case. It's all dependent on the physical layout of the servos. All right, so that's problem number 1. Now, let's talk about problem number 2. With problem number 2, it's the curves. So if you notice in this arrangement, hey, what happened here? Did I lose my... No, for some reason, my flaps stopped working. Oh, because I put them on the slider. Okay. I thought they were still on my switch. Sorry. Okay. The next thing I want to cover is the curve. Now, you can use a switch and that's fine. You know, I just showed you that you can use a switch, and I'll just change it back because it only takes a second to do it. So the switch is fine. The problem with the switch is that it's very deterministic. Now, and the slider is also very deterministic, meaning there's nothing analog about it. If you use a slider, you can have an analog arrangement where you can stop the flaps somewhere in between full deployed and full retracted. On a switch, you can't. It's always going to be a dead spot. No, there's nothing analog. It's not binary because there are 3 positions, but you have retracted, middle, and down, and there's nothing in between that you can use. If you use a slider, you can go in between. But here's the thing. If you're using a switch, you can say, all right, I've got a full flap deployment. This looks good. I've got my flaps are centered where they're supposed to be. They're in the midpoint, and now they're fully deployed. Everything looks good. Notice that I accomplished that by using a curve. I've done a number of videos where you can do this with an offset instead. You can set 50% weight and 50% offset, and when you do that, your entire travel will only be in one direction. So notice in this case, instead, I'm using a curve. Now I want to show you guys, so right now we have the switch set up to be flaps. You can see that when I move the switch, my flaps go down, okay? But here's the deal. For me, I'm moving that switch up and the flaps are going down, and I don't like that. To me, that's kind of counterintuitive. Maybe what I like is when I have the switch down, I want the flaps down, and when I have the switch up, I want the flaps up. Let's show you how to do that. You go into the input, go down to the curve, and all you have to do is highlight the curve. You see the curve I've got highlighted there? Now long press that, and that brings us into the curve editor. So you don't have to bounce all the way out, shoot over to curves, find the curve, edit that. You can do it right from the input screen. So now notice that I've got a 2-point curve. That's going to come into play later. So right now, when I move my switch down, my flaps go up. Don't like that. I want to flip that. So here's how we flip it. I'm going to go down to this value that's got the negative value of 100. And you can see that right now when that switches up, my flaps are all the way down. I want that to be inverted. So instead of being negative 100, I'm simply going to highlight that field and long press, and I'm just going to click on mirror. So when I mirror, that's a problem. Now my flaps are going straight up. So that's not correct either. So what we need to do here is change the arrangement by setting this down to 0. We're going to move this guy down to 0. Now keep in mind, my switch is where I want it to be. I want my flaps stored. So I'm moving down to 0. There we go. Now we got to go over to this value and drop this end of the curve so that when I put my flaps down, it goes the right direction. So I move my flaps down. Now I'm going to move my curve. You see they're going up. That's the wrong direction. I need to go down. Now I can limit the down travel with the curve by setting it, instead of being 100, I can say, well, I only want it to be about, I don't know, 50. So for me, that's where I want the down travel of my flaps. So now they're stored. Now they're fully deployed. And that's my curve governing those endpoints. So now the switch is down. I'm right here on the output and my flaps are down. That's correct. And now I have my switch up. My flaps are stored. That's correct. Now let's just move this to be a little bit further down because I want to do something. I want to exaggerate something for you. Now in this case, notice that we have a 2-position curve, 2-point curve, and that basically says, well, we have a range from 0 to -70. So that means when I'm in the middle position, I'm at -35. Right there, you can see it. And when I'm in the down position, I'm at -70. But what happens if we don't want the middle position to be exactly halfway? Let's say we only want a few degrees of flaps. We don't want it to be halfway. We can solve that by making this a 3-point curve. So I'm going to click on the count and change it from 2 points to 3 points. Now look, I've got another value here, -35, and I can change that value. Let me zoom in just a little bit to make sure you guys can see. Okay, so now I've got a -35 right there. That's the midpoint. The curve automatically applied that second or that third point on the middle. So now I can say, I don't want it to be that far down for this one, so I'm gonna change it. Instead of being -35, I'm gonna make that I don't know, 10. Let's try 10. Okay, now you can see that I've changed my curve. So this flap deployment now, when I put these flaps down, notice that when I go to the mid position, they barely move, right? And now when I go to the bottom position, they go the rest of the way. Okay, so this is how you fine tune where your flaps are. And by the way, you can put it in the middle and say, well, I want to use the scroll dial and just use the scroll dial to figure out where you want it to be for the middle. Let's call it 25. There you go. So now you've got a curve that dictates your middle position for you on your flaps. So you can put your flaps in the middle position wherever you want, and you can put them in the down position wherever you want, and you can put them in the up position wherever you want, simply by controlling these 3 points. And then when you're done and you're happy with that, you back out of it, and now you've got your curve designed for your switch to work perfectly. And if you want to switch over to your slider, which I like sliders for mine, let me just highlight this and I'll just move the slider. The slider, notice the slider follows the same exact curve. The curve doesn't change just because we change the stick. So when I'm in the middle position, when that slider is at its middle detent, I'm still at that -25 value that I set up when I had it on a stick. And when I'm all the way down, I'm here. But notice also it's inverted. It's inverted. The stick and the slider are inverted. So I would have to work on this curve to change that. I'd have to invert the curve is basically what I'd have to do. All right. So there you go. There is the flaps and using curves. And let me just go and tell you one other quick little thing. This will also work for gear. So if you want to set up gear, you can do the same thing. If you have a mechanical gear, for example, you can use the curve to arrange your gear endpoints for mechanical gear. And if you're using just a regular landing gear, electrical servo landing gear, you probably don't need to worry about a curve. You probably just need a switch assigned to full on or full off. That's it. So just wanted to throw that out there that you can use this same curve concept to tune mechanical landing gear if you have them. Okay. So that is it on the curves for landing gear. Now, one other thing I want to tell you about the ability to convert from flaps to spoilerons, because I get that all the time too. Like we just did an arrangement where we use a slider to create flaps, but some people might say, well, I want spoilerons. You can do that. To do that, you go into this curve and edit it, and all you have to do is change your endpoint. So notice I've got 0 on this side. If I were to change that to a positive value, let's say, I don't know, 30, what'll happen is when I got on the other side of neutral, notice that those flaps now become spoilerons. So I can use center if I want I can use the center value. We'll call the center value 0, which would be neutral, right? That'd be the parked position. So now if I'm in the center, I have no flaps and I have no spoilerons. If I move my slider down, I've got flaps. And if I move my slider up, I've got spoilerons. If you just want spoilerons and no flaps, you simply get rid of the other end of your curve and set that to 0. You could actually make this a 2-point curve again, but now this is going to be a little wonky. So now you want the down position to be fully parked, or the up position to be fully parked. So now I've got my slider all the way up, my flaps are parked. Now if I move my slider down, Instead of having flaps, I have spoilerons. So the trick is manipulate the curve. Get in here and play with the curve, and you can make these things do whatever you want. I get this. I can't even tell you guys how many times I get this question all the time. What about flaps? What about spoilerons? What about flaps and spoilerons? This is how you do it. This is the best way to do it. It's very simple to do it this way, because using a curve, you can massage the endpoints and the stop points and midpoints to wherever you want them to be. So learn, just toy with it, just like we did in this video. That's all we did was we toyed with it. Put your switch where you want it. So my switch is all the way up right now. And if I say, well, those are middle and they shouldn't be there, well, I got to figure out where is the line. It's right here. There, you can see the little follower. You see that? You see that line right there? It's following the switch. That's it right there. So if I want that to be my spoiler up, all we have to do is find that position and raise it. So we're just going to raise it. Now that's up. And then we can come over to this side and say, we'll set this side down to 0. And that's basically how you reverse it. So there we go. Now my spoilers are closed because my switch is down, and my spoilers are up because my switch is up. So there you go. You just get in here and play with these curves, and you can set them however you want. And there's no right or wrong way. You can do it however it makes you happy. All right, that's it. So let me go back to the blackboard, and let's see. We've covered stuck keys, we did the mixer, and we did the flaps and spoilers, and we did curves. So we've covered all the topics for today. Let me go back and check the comments. If you guys have something specific I can answer in this format, I'll try my best. But I'm going to go back and check the comments and see where we are. Let's see. Fail safe, not set warning. Are we allowed to ask questions? I can't find my channel monitor. How to find? Okay, Pete. But did somebody answer that for you? Let me see. I think that might have been answered. Okay, he got it. Pete got it. So Vance, good job, Vance. Thanks for jumping in there. I appreciate that. So input channels should be no. Bart, that's another one. Oh, good question, Bart. Thank you for bringing that up. I get that one all the no, I don't want to say all the time. I don't want to exaggerate. That's exaggerating to say I get it all the time, but no. Look, you see on this input screen, let me bring up the input screen and show you guys. Let me zoom in a little bit. That is a really good question, Bart. Thanks for bringing that up, because I have been asked that question before. I've been asked, wait a minute. You have on this side on input, you have Aileron on line 1, but over here, you have Aileron on line 2. What's up with that? You can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. They're not, it doesn't matter. I can watch this. I'm just going to mess with you guys. Okay, let's just mess with this a little bit. Let's just tinker with it. Okay, so here's my ailerons, right? I'm moving my ailerons. Everything's good. So that means that on my mixer, my ailerons are set up on channel 1 and channel 5. Everything's copacetic, right? No worries. Now I'm going to go back to my input screen, and just to mess around, I'm going to highlight this. And I'm going to hit move, and I'm going to bring my ailerons all the way down here. I'm going to put them on 16 just because I feel like being a rebel. They still... come on, you're going to make a liar out of me. Might have to delete this. Might have to delete this one. What? I'm going to delete this one. There we go. I promise you it'll work. Oh, there it is. That's why. It's because it's set to 01. So I'm going to edit this, and I'm just going to edit this, and we're going to set it. See, it's using line name 01, but watch. I'm going to change this to Aileron, because I still have an Aileron definition. It's 16 because I didn't name it, but there we go. You see that? So it doesn't matter. You just have to name. Yeah, I had to name it. I had to. When I deleted it, it changed its source to 01, and that was not correct. So the point of the matter is, though, is that you can put these wherever you want them. If I come down here to 16 and I just name this, I didn't name it. So let me just name it so you guys can see that it looks the same. I get that right? That's a J, isn't it? JKL. Okay, there we go. So now I have AIL right here on this line 16, I'm using the aileron stick as the input, and all you have to do is define that input on your mixer and it still works. They do not have to match up. They have nothing. The input line right here has nothing to do with the mix line. They're not related. The mix line right here is specific to the electrical pin on your receiver. The input line, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can put this stuff wherever you want it. It doesn't matter. It's going by the name, not the line. So we're calling this AIL, and all you have to do is make sure you have that AIL input source on the mixer. Now, if you erase it, yeah, it's referring back to the line number, but the point is it doesn't matter what line it's on. As long as you have an input defined and you connect that input to your mix line, it's fine. You can put them in whatever order you want. So that was a very good question, Bart. Thank you for asking that. Let's see, Vance, press the model button twice. You got that. RCVR, somewhat on topic. Is there any particular strategy? So Dave says, is there any strategy when you use setting up rates or expo on the input page versus the mixer page? Anytime when one is, Dave, I never set up rates or expo on the mixer unless I'm actually doing a mix, okay? If I'm doing a mix, like I'm trying to mix, say, elevator and flaps, or if I've got a delta wing and I need to mix aileron and elevator, then I put weights in the mixer. If we're talking about just a conventional aircraft, I only do weights and expo in the input screen. And the reason for that is because when you start getting into mixes that have very complex mixes, like say a wing, and you're just doing aileron, elevator, elevator, aileron, and you want to make a change to weight, if you do the weight change in the mixer, then you have to make sure you have that weight applied on every single line in the mixer. If you do the weight change in your input screen instead, then anything that uses the aileron for an input will get that weight change. So for me, my practice is real simple. I only ever use weights in the mixer for an actual mix. I do, and what I mean by that is aileron and elevator, you have an aileron and an elevator, right, on a wing, and it's one control surface doing two things. So if the control surface can move 100%, I give 50% to the aileron and 50% to the elevator. That's my normal mix. Okay, that's how I mix a wing. And then from on the left-hand side in inputs, that's where I'll control the rates. So I only use weights when I'm doing an actual mix. I do not use them to control, say, throw or distance and things like that. Same with expo. I don't ever do expo in the mixer. All right. Let's see. Vance says that was good. Nice shortcut. Why not set weight to -100? I'm not sure what the context was on that, but if you're talking about the curve, maybe you're talking about the curve. Trust me, just do it the way I showed you. It's the correct way. Oh, okay. You said I see why now after that. We should all smash the like button. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, Vance, thanks for that, man. If you guys can hit the like button, there's 40 people watching. If you guys can hit like, man, that really helps out. Are you going to show how to mix elevator with those flaps? Okay. Look, I get that one all the time. Let's mix the elevator with the flaps. So everyone always wants to know that one. Okay. First thing, we'll go ahead and do it. I don't mind doing it. Let's do it. I'm going to change my flap first. So I want to set the flaps to be correct. So I'm going to go into my flap curve. Let me zoom in a little so you guys can see what I'm doing. Everybody always wants to know how to mix flaps to elevator. So let's do it. Let's do it. I'm going to invert this curve because I want this to be the other way around. So in this side, this needs to be, that's -4. We're going to set that to be 0. And I'm going to also change this to a 2-point curve just because we're just doing a demo here. And then we'll go to the bottom and we'll set this the other way. Okay, so there we go. We have flaps. You guys can see the flaps there. I'm maybe zoomed in too close to get both. Okay, so there we go. We've got flaps. All right, and that is backwards. I want that the other way around. So this has to be changed to 0. And then this one needs to be changed to -50. Okay, so there's my flaps. That works the way I would expect my flaps to work. I go down, the flaps are down. I push this up, they're up. Okay, that's the way I expect them to work. So now let's go into our mixer. And by the way, that shortcut in here, when you're on the curve screen, This is a really good shortcut, because if you don't do this, then you have to back out like this, and then you got to go over to curves, and then you have to find the curve that you're working on and edit it and go down. It's just a really nice shortcut to do it the way I just showed you. Okay, so now we're going to go into mixer. Now, when it comes to mixing, what I always say to myself when I'm preparing to do a mix is I'll say, what is the thing that needs to be modified? So if we're putting flaps down, what thing are we modifying? Are we modifying the flaps? No, that's not what we're saying. The flaps are going down. We want the flaps to go down. We have total control of that. We don't need to modify the flaps. Flaps are fine. What we need to do is modify the elevator, because what we're saying is when those flaps go down, we need the elevator to do something different. So the problem is that if you put the flaps down, the plane tends to balloon, right? It lifts the nose up, and we want to correct that by saying, no, let's push the nose down just a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll go into the elevator. That's the thing that needs to be corrected, and we're going to add the thing that's going to do the correction. So in this case, we're going to use our flaps. So let me find flaps here. There's flaps. Now we have our flaps are in the 0 position all the way up. And when I move the flaps down, the elevator is going up. That's terrible. That's terrible. So we need to invert that. So let's invert that, and we'll go, instead of 100, we'll go negative, I don't know, we'll do negative 50. So there we go. Now I'll put the flaps back up in the 0 position, and hopefully you can see the elevator is neutral. When I bring those flaps down, notice the elevator goes down. So let me just prop this up so you can see it. All right, flaps are down, and that means the airplane's going to balloon. That means the nose wants to go up, and we counter that by giving a little down elevator. So I'll put my flaps in the neutral position. You can see the elevator's up. I'll put my flaps down, and you can see that elevator moving down. Let me exaggerate it, because that might be hard to see. I want to make sure you guys can see it. There we go. That's a little too much, but there we go. So I'll exaggerate the motion. So here's flaps neutral, flaps down, we got down elevator. All right. So that's how I always think about this problem, is I ask myself when I'm creating mix, what is the thing that needs to be corrected? So in the question that we just had, can you mix flaps to elevator? The thing that needed to be corrected was the elevator, because we're deploying flaps. We have total control over that, but we need to make an adjustment to the elevator when we do it. So in order to do that, we always add the thing that needs to be, we add the thing that's going to do the correction to the thing that needs to be corrected, in this case, the elevator. All right. So let's see. When setting up, let's see, we're going to show how to mix elevator with flaps. Got that one. All right. He does have a vid on that. I do have a video on that. When setting up flaps, can I make it go slow motion down and not 2 or 3 points? Henny, yeah, sure you can. Let's do that. So in the mixer, what you'll do, or in the input screen, we can do that. I think maybe it's in the mixer. It is in the mixer. You can do it in the mixer. This is unfortunate that you have to do it in the mixer, but we'll do it. So if you look at channel 3, we'll hit edit, and all you have to do is go over here to slow down and slow up. So let's just add a value. We'll call it, I'll put it back on a switch too so you guys can see it, but I'm going to do slow up and slow down we'll put them on 6, and I'll have to do it on both of them. It'd be nice if this was on the input screen, so any change you made would apply to all of them, but it's not. See, this is the nature of the problem with using the mixer for things like rates and expo. You have to do this on all of them, and that's why using the input is better, because you don't have to do it on all of them. But anyway, there we go. We're almost there. 6. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to deploy the flaps, and you can see, was I zoomed out far enough? I hope so. If not, I'll show you again. Let me know. But I'm going to deploy the flaps. You can see them still moving, and I'll push them up. You can see they're still moving. So that's how you slow things down. And of course, you can go back and change it to a stick. And the way I did that is in the flap channel, there's an option over here, slow up and slow down. All I did was add a delay of 6 seconds. That's it. All right. Let's see. What's the source in the mixer? So, well, that's the input. Dave, I always use the input. So in the mixer, the source is the input for me. That's what I do. The source is always the input. Art Hutchinson, huge thanks. You're welcome. Can you move it again? Vance, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Move what again? Not sure. Our Dave says it just confuses me sometimes because you can do a lot of the same stuff. I know, Dave. I know, buddy. That, believe me, that is the nature and the source of a lot of desperation when it comes to OpenTx, is that the mixer and the input page can be very confusing. I do appreciate that. And if you go look at my video playlist, you'll notice that I have a lot of material on inputs and mixers because, number one, it's the core of the system. And number two, it's also the source of the most confusion. I'll remind you guys, and I do have a video on inputs and mixes explained, but I'll remind you guys to understand that the flow of information basically goes from stick through inputs, and you can see it in the iconography at the top. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this. I do like to talk about the icons from time to time, but they do matter. So the flow of information is stick, right? That's the brain, right, is connected to the stick. So the input starts with you. You take and move this stick this way, and you connect that stick. In my case, I moved it all the way down here to number 16 to be a smart guy. So we go down all the way down here. So this stick, this Aileron stick, is down here. It's now called AIL, right? So that's how we connect our finger to software. Our finger to software goes through this hardware device, and that hardware is mapped to a name now called AIL. We've given it a weight of 100, which means when I move to 100, go as far as the servo or pulse width can go. And we're connecting that to the actual physical stick. This thing right here, that icon indicates this stick. So, but we now labeled it AIL. So anything that we do to this AIL will be applied to this stick throughout the entire configuration. Okay, that's why we do it. So now we have a software construct that's kind of like a container, and we can do stuff to that container. If we punch the container in the side and dent it, everything that uses that container is dented, right? Because we just defined it as a software construct in the radio. So now if you look at the inputs right here, you see that little triangle? These developers are really smart the way they did this. Good icon design, because they're saying we're starting going into the loop, right? This is a control loop. Now the inputs, this is where it starts. You're entering the control loop right here with inputs. All right, now the next page is the mixer. So we're taking those inputs, that little triangle, and we're mixing them up. We can mix them however we want. We can add flaps to elevators. We can add ailerons to elevators. We can add rudder to aileron. We can do all kinds of different things in the mixer. We can mix things. That's what this iconography is trying to show us. And then the next page is outputs. And the outputs, they show the surface, and they even show movement of the surface. And they say, look, you can do the final control of outputs or the final act of the control loop, which is this icon, by making changes here. And you notice on mine, I've got output control here. I've got 50 and 50, negative 50 and 50. I did that because on my little model, I don't want the throws to be huge and break my little thread. So I always govern the outputs to keep it from getting too far, because I have little threads holding these on and I don't want tension on those. So that's why I always use outputs on my model. So Dave, I do understand, believe me. Just all I can say is keep watching my inputs and mix videos, and hopefully the light clicks on. But that's the flow of information. So anything you do here gets acted on here, and then it gets acted on here. So when you start with a weight of 100, then 100 feeds the mixer, and the mixer says, okay, I'm going to take 100 times 100, or 1 times 1, and that equals 1, and I'm going to feed that to the output. Now the output says, well, I'm going to take 1 times 1 and multiply it times 0.5, and that's the output. So anything that I do from the input through the mixer is fine, but it gets cut in half on the output. So that's the way it works. That's just the math. Anything you do here gets multiplied by what you have here, and then multiplied by what you have here. So that's the best way I can explain it. Chief BD, thanks for hitting the tip jar. Appreciate that, man. Very nice of you when you guys do that. Thank you very much. Teal 94Z28. Oh, 94Z28. Oh, I get it. 94Z28. I'm a new pilot and started out with Spectrum. I got this TX a few days ago. Well, stick with it, man. Watch my videos. There's a lot to learn, but it's a good radio. And the thing about OpenTx is you can do anything you want with it. The Spectrum guys have a little bit of a hard time because they're used to having resources assigned. They're used to seeing this. They're used to seeing receivers that say aileron, elevator, throttle. In an OpenTx, it's not like that. Again, this receiver is a stabilizer, so they have to say, well, we need to know where the aileron is. You can't just move it around willy-nilly. So I do understand that. That makes total sense to me. That does make perfect sense to me. So I want you guys to understand that only because this is a stabilizer do we see those markings. And a lot of Spectrum guys and other radio guys, they come in and they're used to seeing these markings. They're used to saying ailerons go here, elevators go here. But if it weren't for the fact that this is a stabilizer, most of our receivers just look like that. Channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can map them in your mixer however you want. It doesn't matter. You can do it however you want. That little demo plane you made is fantastic. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's a cool little device, man. I'm glad I have this thing. It's really helpful when I'm trying to demonstrate things. I had requests. You know, people were like, "Could you show that on an actual plane?" And I thought, well, a desktop video is really hard to do on an actual plane, so I came up with this, and it's definitely helpful. So thanks for acknowledging that. Appreciate it. Thanks for showing TL94Z28. Thanks for showing the elevator flat mix. You're right. Yeah, you're welcome. Dave says 2 position flaps, so 2 elevator mix. Yeah, Dave, yes, correct. All you would do since you, well, no, because the elevator is a single surface. So in this case, the elevator is the thing that needs to be corrected. So because of that, when we move the flaps, the elevator gets corrected. There's only one elevator. Now, if I were doing that to these ailerons, yes, I would have to apply that mix to both ailerons because both ailerons are on separate channels. And the radio, so, well, let's just do it. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to do a flap adjustment or mix on the aileron. So let's just show, since Dave asked the question, let's just show it. There it is. There's flaps. Okay. So you can see now because I only put the flaps on the one aileron, right? I only have the flap mix on the first aileron channel. Sorry, the first aileron channel, but not the second aileron channel. When I apply the flap mix, it only works on this one aileron. It does not affect this aileron. See, that one's not moving. And that's because the ailerons are on 2 different channels. The elevator is a single channel, so any mix you apply to that single channel will work for that elevator. It's not the other way around. You don't have to do, you don't have, it's the input. Remember, flaps is an input, okay? We have 2 mix lines that use the input. But what we're saying is when you see input from the flaps, do something to the elevator. That makes sense? Hopefully that makes sense. All right. I'm having range issues. Yeah, hop on Discord, Teal94Z28. We can talk about range. You might wind up getting in line with Codemaster there. Let's see. Yeah, get on Discord for sure. Let's see. Bart Hutchinson, thanks for hitting the tip jar. Very nice of you. I appreciate that. Very good. Thanks for hitting the tip jar. $10. Very nice of you. Let's see. You have to disable warnings for DSM receivers. Shouldn't affect range. Based on the plane not responding. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. I'm just scrolling through comments. I tested with DJI drone. Looking at my plane. Almost lost my Habu. Finally, someone got useful information. Okay. So with DSM receivers, you're better off just turn telemetry warnings off. Dave, yeah, Dave. Hey guys, by the way, and I'll say that too, Dave, RC Air Marshal. If you follow my channel, you know I don't really do Spectrum, so I am not a source of information for Spectrum, but Dave is. So if you're into Spectrum gear, make sure you check out RC Air Marshal's YouTube channel, and he knows a ton about Spectrum. I know zilch, literally zilch. I know they're too expensive for my taste. That's what I know. That's it. So if you guys need help with Spectrum, Dave's your guy. He knows enough about OpenTx and Spectrum to be very helpful. All right, yeah, you guys are talking about, let's see. Okay, yep. We're all the way to the bottom of the questions, and I think we're at the end of the material. No, TL94Z28, check out RC Air Marshal's YouTube channel, and he can help you out. Hey, for you guys that hit the tip jar, thank you. Again, very nice of you to do that. And for the patrons, I just want to give a special shout out to them. Thank you guys for helping support the channel. Always very helpful. You guys help offset the cost for the channel, and I want to remind you, if you're willing and your budget allows, I have Patreon levels as low as $3. It's like a cup of coffee. So if you like the help you get here and you want to help support my efforts on the channel, everything that I get on my various income streams for YouTube all goes back into the channel. So just throwing that out there, if you guys are willing to do that, I always appreciate that help. And I'm glad you guys asked the questions. If you had something that was a little off topic and I couldn't cover it, make sure you get on Discord. Discord's a great place. We have a bunch of smart guys there. They can help. We have a really good group of people on Discord. Pop in there and you'll be surprised. You can get all kinds of help on our RCVR Discord server. Links will be in the description for that too. All right, guys, that brings us to the bottom of the material. I hope you all learned something today. I hope the troubleshooting techniques were helpful. I hope, you know, what I really endeavor to do on these things is teach you how to fish. I don't like giving you the fish. I want to teach you how to fish. And that's what I'm aiming for. So I hope that some of the techniques we covered today teach you a little bit about how to navigate and operate the radio. That's what I'm after. And I hope that I accomplish that. RCVR Marshall says, slow down, Turbo. I come here because I know squat. Yeah, whatever, man. You're learning, but you got the Spectrum stuff down. So I think you'll be fine. You'll be a good help. All right, Pete Buttons, thanks a lot. You're welcome very much. Vance, it was great. Appreciate the comment, man. Thank you very much. And I think that's it, guys. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for all the great questions and for helping us uncover new issues for other people. So I appreciate the good questions. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy.